The humidity of the Missouri River hangs heavy, thick enough to choke the breath out of a man, but the tension on the riverbank near the mouth of the Bad River is thicker still. It is late September 1804, and the young American Republic is seconds away from a bloody baptism in the wilderness. Captain William Clark stands on the bow of the pirogue, ready for the fighting to cataclysmically erupt, while behind him, the men on the 55-foot keelboat swing their swivel guns and rifles towards the shore. Facing them are the Teton Sioux, 100 strong, their bows drawn, their arrows leveled, the hearts of the explorers who dare to pass through their sovereign territory without paying a heavy toll. This is the Teton Sioux standoff, a moment where the Empire of Liberty could have ended in a shallow grave along the riverbank. For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound is the rushing of the muddy water, the murmur of the Sioux, which seems to be growing louder and louder, approaching what will be a horrible climax. This is the moment where the high-minded ideals of Thomas Jefferson and his boyish joy of the West and the opportunity to explore it meet the hard, unyielding reality of life in the American West, where one never quite knows how things will go. William Clark, a man forged on the Kentucky frontier after being born in Virginia, does not flinch. He looks the Sioux leaders in the eye with a glare that is as steady as it is defiant, backed up by the swivel gun and rifles of his terrified but courageous men. It is a masterpiece of brinksmanship, a display of undaunted courage that forces the Sioux to realize that these Americans are not mere traitors that can be bullied, but the vanguard of a rising nation. Disaster is averted, not by retreat, but by a show of military readiness and the intervention of Chief Black Buffalo. The mission will proceed, and a whole new continent can now unfold before our intrepid explorers. To understand how these 30-odd men found themselves in the crosshairs of the most powerful tribe on the Great Plains, we have to go back to the beginning. We must return to a time when the West was an unknown entity. The future of the United States was being written by a philosopher president and the two Virginia gentlemen he trusted to execute his grand design. This is more than a journey of miles. It is a journey of national identity, a mission to anchor a fragile republic to the shores of the Pacific. This is the core of discovery, an American epic. Welcome back to The Old World with Will Tanner, the show where we tell the tales of the great colonial adventurers and magnificent American and British families of the world that used to exist. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share the video around if you like it. That's how we grow and keep this project going. This time, we're not talking about the White Rajas of Sarawak. We're telling the tale of Lewis and Clark's expedition, one of the greatest movements and grandest achievements in American history. A magnificent march across an unexplored continent in the name of science, exploration, commerce, and dominion. It's a perfect bridge between the tale of the White Rajas and our upcoming series, the story of Virginia and her great families, as all three of the key characters, Jefferson, Lewis, and Clark, are Virginians. So sit back and enjoy this new series on the incredible Lewis and Clark expedition. The year is 1801. Thomas Jefferson, a planter from the Virginia Piedmont, the third president of the United States, looks out beyond the unfinished halls of Washington, D.C. He is, after all, the first D.C.-based president and envisions a horizon he has never seen but has spent a lifetime imagining, the West's. Jefferson is a man of the Enlightenment, a polymath obsessed with the natural world and natural sciences. To him, the West is not just a collection of trees and rivers, nor a mere opportunity for money-grubbing commerce, however necessary such things may be. It is a canvas upon which the American experiment will either succeed or wither away. He dreams of an empire of liberty, a continental republic that would provide the agrarian base necessary to sustain a truly free people. And as a Virginia planter who knows the necessity of new land to replace that which has been worn out by steady use, the Louisiana Territory beckons. Jefferson's vision, after all, is not merely philosophical. It is intensely practical and immensely urgent. In 1801, the United States is a fragile coastal strip, hemmed in by the British to the north, the Spanish to the west and south, as Western settlers consider breaking away for good. The great powers of Europe are already racing to claim the Pacific Northwest, hoping to secure the Northwest Passage, that mythical all-water route that would link the Atlantic to the Pacific and unlock the lucrative fur trade with the Orient. In fact, a young Scotsman named Alexander Mackenzie is, unbeknownst to Jefferson, currently in London, publishing his tales of exploring the path to Canada's west coast years before. He didn't find the Northwest Passage, not quite, but he thinks he got tantalizingly close, and the race is on. Jefferson knows that if the United States does not reach the Pacific first, the young nation will be permanently bottled up, forever at the mercy of European monarchs. It might even be divided and never get the chance, being the continental empires he knows it could be, populated by a moral yeomanry that spread the dominions of civilization over a vast landmass. In fact, beyond the threat of foreign crowns, Jefferson is haunted by an internal crisis, the growing divergence between the established East and the burgeoning West. As settlers pour over the Appalachian Mountains into Kentucky and Tennessee, they are becoming culturally and economically detached from the Atlantic states, hostile to the Eastern attitude. Jefferson fears that without a physical and commercial link, a water communication across this continent, the trans-Appalachian West might break away, form its own independent nation, or worse, align with a foreign power like Spain. By finding a route through the Missouri, Jefferson hopes to bind these two halves together, creating a unified American identity anchored by trade and shared discovery. But that's not all Jefferson has in mind. The secondary objectives of the mission he's dreaming up will be scientific and economic. He wants his intrepid explorers to study the flora, fauna, and geography of the region, to establish trade with Native American tribes. When later drafted, Jefferson's instruction to Lewis, a bright young man who was once his neighbor in the Piedmont and is now living in the White House as his aide, will be explicit. Take observations of latitude and longitude at all remarkable points, especially the mouths of rivers and rapids. He wanted to know about the names of the nations and their numbers, the extent of their possessions and their dispositions towards the United States. He wants to know of the wildlife, the minerals, the nature of the area to America's west. This was to be a mission of peace, commercial intercourse, a neighborly overture to the peoples inhabiting the line the expedition would pursue. But, of course, the land isn't America's. Spain owns it right now, and as France has conquered Spain, more or less, France owns Louisiana. Kinda. It hasn't actually sent any troops to take possession, and has been told doing so will be an act of war. What troops it has nearby are largely dying in Haiti. Spain's possession of this wilderness, so vast, is and always has been tenuous at best, other than in New Orleans. So what is to be done must be secret, Jefferson realizes. He has dreamed of this expedition for years, tried organizing such things as private ventures multiple times before, attempts that have come to nothing, and he's getting antsy. He knows he wants to act, and knows just the man who can do his exploring. Young and talented Meriwether Lewis. As he and Lewis dream and plot, the president teaching Lewis everything he knows about the Indians, the western lands, naturalism, science, and so on, they voraciously devour an early printing of Mackenzie's tales of making it to the Pacific, which spurs them to yet further action. The real opportunity arrives in April of 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. For $15 million, the United States doubled its size overnight, acquiring over 800,000 square miles of territory from Napoleon Bonaparte. Suddenly, the unknown entity of the West is American soil, at least on paper. That is convenient, as President Jefferson had already put in motion what was to become the Lewis and Clark expedition. That came in January of 1803, when Jefferson sent a secret message to Congress requesting $2,500 to fund the venture. He used the pretext of extending the external commerce of the United States to mask the mission's strategic and scientific nature from rivals like Great Britain and Spain, who then controlled or contested much of the western interior. Beyond seeking the Northwest Passage, again, a direct water route to the Pacific for trade, one that was mythical and always hoped for, Jefferson mandated the scrupulous recording of geography, of climate, and the natural wealth of the continent through the lens of Enlightenment and empiricism. But now, in April, the land is no longer owned by Spain or France, and America has the better claim than Britain. The full and open expedition of which he has long dreamed can finally come about, and his personal secretary and planter neighbor, the outdoors-loving Army officer Meriwether Lewis, will lead it as a scientific frontiersman. Born in Albemarle County, Virginia, 1774, Meriwether Lewis was the scion of the Virginia gentry, a neighbor and protege of Jefferson himself, whose Locust Hill plantation is not quite as grand as Jefferson's Monticello holdings, but still a great estate of thousands of acres. But Lewis was never a man destined for the sedentary life of Virginia planter. The cropping cycles and tobacco culture bore him, and he has quite liked the taste of frontier life he's already gotten. After his father died during the Revolutionary War, the young Lewis moved with his mother and his new stepfather, as his mother had remarried after his father's passing, to the Georgia frontier, where he honed his wilderness survival and hunting skills, becoming an expert woodsman long before he was a soldier. Though he loved learning, as well as spending vast sums later in life to ensure his siblings got fuller formal educations than he was to, it is this life in the woods, a life of adventure and exploration along the open frontier, that he loves. His mother, Lucy Marks, in any case, was not just a renowned herbalist, though she was, a valuable skill set she passed down to her son, and which was to prove very helpful soon enough, but also a woman comfortable with and competent at managing an estate. She could and would handle Locust Hill. Lewis wanted to explore. So, though Lewis returned to Virginia to manage the family estate, the call of the frontier was too strong and loud for him to ignore. He joined the army. Starting as a mere private during the Whiskey Rebellion, the growth of the army and his natural competence eventually led to him rising to the rank of captain, the 1st Regiment of Infantry. As his varied frontier postings acquainted him with nearly every officer in the fledgling American military, he was an invaluable resource to Thomas Jefferson, who, when he was elected president, chose Lewis to be his personal secretary. This was eventually a role that was essentially a 2-year apprenticeship for the mission of a lifetime. But at first, Jefferson used Lewis to find out which incompetents and political enemies he needed to purge from the ranks of the army. That was soon over, with Lewis doing a remarkably good job of it, and he soon was on to other things. Most of all, he was exposed to Jefferson's great mind, vast library, and obsessive interest in the West. He was also exposed to Jefferson's repeated desires to send an exploratory mission west. Lewis had begged to be in charge of an earlier, abortive attempt, and made himself seen as the perfect choice. He possessed the exact mix of woodsman skills, bravery, and intellect Jefferson required, and he made that clear. Jefferson saw this. He also saw in Lewis the immense courage and talent required to face the unknown. Lewis was a man who could command men with a master's hand, a trait typical of all competent Virginia planters, march indefinitely through primeval woods, or sit for hours sketching the intricacies of a new species of bird or plant he discovered. However, Lewis was also a man of deep, brooding intensity, a perfectionist who felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Jefferson recognized this melancholy in him, a trait he noted was hereditary in the Lewis family. But for now, it was nothing, a mere minor issue with a great man who could and would lead a grand expedition. And so Lewis, Jefferson's pupil, was made the scientific lead, tasked with documenting the flora, fauna, and geography of a new world. He knew the magnitude of what Jefferson was asking, and he knew he could not do it alone. He needed a partner who could balance his temperament, a man who was a steady, natural leader. He would eventually decide on William Clark, an old commander and friend from their army days. William Clark was, like Jefferson and Lewis, born in Virginia. But Clark was to be no Old Dominion planter. About a decade and a half after his 1770 birth, his family moved, and he was raised on and remained rooted in the Kentucky frontier, a landscape that demanded constant vigilance, military readiness, and frontier skills. He was the younger brother of the legendary Revolutionary War hero, George Rogers Clark, the conqueror of the Old Northwest, who personally taught William the art of wilderness survival, frontier warfare. By the time he was a young man, William was already a seasoned military commander, serving in the Indian Wars of the 1790s. It was during his military service in 1795 that Clark first met Meriwether Lewis. Though their time together was brief, they formed a bond of deep mutual trust and friendship that would be the bedrock of the expedition. While Lewis was the intellectual, the scientist, Clark was the master cartographer, the river navigator, the logistical manager, along with the commander who could and would keep the men in line and on point. And his cartographic skills were something to behold. His maps would eventually provide the first accurate look at the American interior, fixing latitude and longitude at all remarkable points, as Jefferson had instructed. Clark was to be the steady hand the expedition needed. He was a man of upbeat tone and immense social intelligence, capable of maintaining camp discipline while also serving as a primary diplomat to the tribes they would encounter. When Lewis wrote to Clark in 1803, offering him a shared command, it was an unprecedented move in military history. The official orders would list Clark as lieutenant due to a bureaucratic snafu that couldn't be reversed, but Lewis insisted that they be treated as co-leaders in every sense of the word. Clark's response was characteristically direct and heartfelt. I join you with hand and heart. The partnership between Lewis and Clark was the bedrock of the Corps of Discovery, but they needed a crew capable of surviving 2.5 years in the wilderness. They didn't just need soldiers. They needed those sorts of young men from Kentucky, tough, unmarried frontiersmen capable of extended periods of extreme physical labor. They needed hunters like George Drouard, whose tracking and sign language skills would make him one of the most valuable men on the journey. They needed specialists like John Shields, the gunsmith and blacksmith, who would perform essential maintenance on the party's firearms and tools, along with getting them out of a few scrapes with the starvation and Indians. They needed men who were brave, disciplined, unmarried, and very capable. The group they were soon to assemble would be a diverse group, a fun cross-section of frontier life that would encounter extraordinary challenges and overcome them. It included Clark's servant, a slave named York, a vital hunter and caregiver whose presence provided a unique cultural curiosity for the tribes they encountered. It included sergeants like John Ordway, who would maintain a daily journal and enforce discipline. Patrick Gass, a skilled carpenter, who would be the first to publish a journal of the trip. This was the Corps of Discovery. More on them in future episodes. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, these three Virginians, Jefferson, Lewis, and Clark, were laying the foundation for a nation that would eventually span a continent. They were men of the old world, virtues, of honor and duty, yet they were driven by a new world hunger for discovery and expansion, and a Virginian's innate drive for ever more fertile land on which tobacco could be profitably grown. They were launching an expedition that would prove overland travel to the Pacific was possible, though no Northwest Passage existed. They were to discover over 100 new plant and animal species along the way and fill in the blank swaths of the maps, showing what was there, from rivers and tributaries to Indian tribes and mountain ranges. The journey that began in the mind of Thomas Jefferson was about to take its first physical steps. In the coming episodes, we will follow them as they leave the comfort of civilization behind St. Louis in May 1804, heading up the treacherous Missouri River into a land of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary danger. They would face prolonged periods of deprivation, adversity that would have broken lesser men, in a wilderness that was as fearsome as it was uncharted. But they carried with them the courage and tenacity that would define the American character for generations to come. They were the first Americans to explore the new Northwest, acquired in the Louisiana Purchase, and their objective was clear: map the territory, find the Northwest Passage, and establish an American presence before others could claim it. The stage is set, the vision is clear, the men are ready. The greatest exploration in American history is about to begin. In our next episode, we will go behind the scenes of the most intensive scientific preparation in American history. We'll follow Meriwether Lewis to Philadelphia, where he would study with the nation's greatest minds to become a scientific lead worthy of Jefferson's trust. We'll see him gather the specialized gear, from custom-made rifles to portable soup, that would keep the Corps alive when the land offered nothing but hunger. And we'll witness the moment the Corps finally set sail from Cape Boy, headed into the heart of a continent that was still, to them, a great and beautiful mystery. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to share that journey with you next time. Bye.